Robo Pit, the sport of the future today. It's a story of one young robot fighter rising through the ranks to be the best in a futuristic gladiatorial event known as Robo Pit. Now, to start this game, you have to make a character. You pick a body, which decides its special attack. You pick a face, which gives it some personality. You pick legs, which determine its ability to jump, run, and turn, as well as weapons, which kind of self-explanatory. Which leads me to my ultimate creation, Punchy the Robot. Named for his mighty fists, they're the only weapon he needs, in honor of his ancestors, the mighty Rock'em Sock'em robots. And not just because he lost all the weapons in the first couple fights, because this game can be really brutal when it wants to be. So, if that's what you're thinking, you're wrong. It's totally to homage the Rock'em Sock'em robots. Anyway, the customization is pretty thorough, especially given when this game came out. There's several different options for body type, face type, weapons, legs, and the neat thing is they can all be colored independently. But there are two problems I have with the customization. First off, once you've built your robot, you can modify your robot's name, you can modify your robot's weapons, you can even change its color if you want, but you can't modify its body type or legs. So if you decide the legs you've got on your robot aren't working, you basically have to scrap your robot and start back at square one. And that's a little bit frustrating. I didn't really care for that. And my second problem is really just the depth of color customization. While you can change every different part of your robot to a different color independently of one another, and that's really cool, I really like that, your options for a color scheme are rather limited. You have a palette on the right which gives you a few different choices, but they're preset. So if you wanted, like, say, a gold and black color scheme, if that's not available, you're just out of luck. And you have to make do with what's there. But to be fair, the depth of customization for a title that came out at this time is still incredibly impressive, and really that's just me wanting more than realistically is available. Once you've got your almighty robot set up to fight, you send him into the Robo Pit. You start at rank 101, and you must climb all the way up to rank 1, gaining points by defeating various robots. Now you can't go challenge number 1 right off the bat, you have to build your way up there by earning points. But you still get to challenge a wide variety of different robots. You don't have to go down the list of 100, 99, 98. And I liked that because it meant that you had options. You could sort of preview what your opponent would be before you fight them, and then decide, okay, that guy's specialized for range, I can't really deal with that, I'm gonna go fight the next guy up, who might be more my speed. That gives you options, and that's really cool. I really like that. What's more is the list isn't preset. For example, the guy who starts out rank 100 might next battle be ranked 80, because they're constantly getting thrown into fights as well. Granted, they're theoretical, you don't get to witness them, but it means that this entire competition feels realistic with an ever-changing opponent roster. Anyway, once you've picked your opponent, you take him to the Robo Pit, an arena combat match set in several different areas. Deserts, space, grasslands, the Arctic, and what's cool is each of these areas has their own set pieces. For example, in space, you'll have asteroids that are flying around, and if they hit you, they can actually damage you. You have to be very aware of this. But what's really cool about this is a lot of these set pieces can be interacted with, which is kind of mind-blowing, again, considering when this game came out. You can pick up pieces of the set and just use them as weapons, which is a very viable way to take out your opponent, especially if they can outgun you. But perhaps you've got a speed advantage, so you can run to the other side of the map, pick up a rock, and just hold them at bay. That's awesome. Again, gives you more options for combat instead of just relying on your weapons. Now once you're in the arena, it's time to fight, which initially starts out in first person. You can set this up to be in third person, in both behind the robot and slightly above, but I kind of preferred first person just because it was kind of a unique thing. Because honestly, I've only ever seen one other fighting game that had a first person mode, and that was Bushido Blade, and holy crap, I have got to find some time to talk about Bushido Blade. That game was awesome. Regardless, Once you set up your camera as you like, the fight begins, and the combat is pretty simple. You run up to your opponent, you hit A to attack with your left arm, B to attack with your right arm, C to jump, and X and Y to block. You also have a super meter of sorts, which gains more strength as you take damage. Once your super meter is charged, hitting both A and B will unleash your special attack. So combat gives you plenty of different options and strategies, both based on your weapons, your body type, and your environment. Now when you win a fight, comes what is quite possibly one of the best things about Robo Pit. You rip off the arms of your opponent and then staple them to your own robot. I'm not kidding. When you beat a robot, you get to take their weapons and then throw them onto your guy. And that's amazing. Why? Well, because this works in reverse as well. And that actually creates an amazing risk-reward dynamic. Because you might not necessarily want to go in using your best stuff, because if you lose the fight, you're going to lose it. Ideally, you'd want to use it simply because it'll give you the best chance of survival, but if the opponent you've picked might just outclass you, you might want to go with something lower and just try and skill your way through the fight. And I just thought this dynamic was incredibly brilliant. Now, speaking of weapons, there are tons. You've got swords, hammers, Punchy's awesome mega fists, even bigger mega fists which are way slower. You've got crossbows, you've got hook shots, you've got axes, swords, I already said swords, knives, and lips. Because at some point there had to be a fighting game where you fought with lips, right? And what's really cool is there are tons of different variations on each weapon. There's about 3 different sizes of Punchy Fist, which vary in stats in attack versus speed. I think I saw like 5 different shields. There has got to be at least over 50 different weapons in this game, and that's just tremendous. And if you find something you really like, using it over and over in combat will build up your experience with it, and in turn it'll deal more damage, becoming an even more effective weapon with you. There are so many different cool little subsystems like that nuance the gameplay slightly, that just further your options in combat. It's amazing. The soundtrack is, by and large, fitting, but not terribly memorable. There are 2 tracks that really do ring in my mind though. The first one is the song that plays while you're customizing your robot, which is a weird song with a dial tone in the background and an operator. It was weird, but it was really cool and memorable. The other song that stuck in my mind was one of the combat themes with copious amounts of piano, and you should be listening to that right now. And because it's a Sega Saturn game, you can plop that into your computer and you put it on your iTunes and then listen to it while you're playing a much less awesome fighting game. Given the number of opponents, given the near endless combinations of weapons, body types, stats, experience, and environments, there is a remarkable amount of replay value to this game. And while my copy is in Japanese, it was also released in North America and European markets, both on the Sega Saturn and the PS1. And while I can't say for certain, I'd say it's probably a fair assumption that the PS1 probably had more loading time associated with it. And Robo Pit actually did well enough that it actually received a sequel. And I actually have it right now, and I'm going to talk about it at some point. I could do it sooner if someone really wants me to, but it did some weird things with the robot design. They completely changed the aesthetic of the robots, and they added a weird story mode to it, so it was its own different thing. I managed to get my copy and the sequel together for less than the price of a cup of coffee, so it really shouldn't cost you all that much. But that's Robo Pit, the legend of Punchy the Robot. And as a side note, I think I speak for everyone in the world right now when I say, if real championship fighting involved ripping off the arms of your opponents and stapling them to you to make you stronger, I think everyone would enjoy that a hell of a lot more than watching 2 guys hug each other for about 3 minutes. I'm just saying.
Yes.